If we had talked about nutrition at the start of the year, I would have pretty much told you that I had a pretty good understanding of it all and that we could do this, this, and this, and we'd pretty much be on track. And now I still believe that. I don't think there's anything wrong with any of the methods that I've used in the past. In fact, I think calorie tracking is important for some people. I think macro tracking can be very beneficial. I think high protein diets are really, really useful for a lot of people. I also believe that whole foods should be the foundation of a sustainable diet. So if we use those things, I still believe that that is the best way for most people to achieve an outcome. Now, I have also learned over the start of this year with my own experimentation and obviously reading and following some other people on YouTube's that there are some things that I did not still understand. And look, looking at the science, and the science on this stuff is actually fairly recent anyway. And so even though it's sort of new, it's not. And there have been people practicing this stuff for a long time, but like as with anything, you sort of get caught up in your little sphere of things and you start getting results that work and are replicable. And that's the key. Everything that I used to do is still replicable and very effective. I get great results with people with those systems. But it's always good to learn new things and trial them out and see if these systems will work with some people. And the sugar diet, which is becoming very, very popular on the interwebs, is one of those things. I was very much an advocate for balance or even lower carb dieting. I find those very effective for myself and most of my clients. In fact, I run a keto group and get very good results in that group with everybody involved in that group. So, when I heard about the sugar diet, I was skeptical, but I gave it a try and it worked really, really well. So then I dug in a bit deeper and I spoke to others in the sphere like Mark Bell, Joe Binley, listened to Jay Feldman and a number of other people. Anabology is another great one. And so I read all these other resources and I dug in a little bit about the systems that were being applied here. And obviously Cole Robinson with the snake diet. Everybody else in the sphere I can get on board with. I struggle to get on board with Cole's message and the way he presents his message, but that's me. I'm a gentler touch, I guess, which is quite funny to say. But, so I learned about the sugar diet. I gave it a try. I did it for about a month and I got pretty good results. I lost 5 kilos relatively consistently, managed to keep that off. But then what I found was when I went up and down, when I ate other things, it went up and down. And so it wasn't like a consistent weight loss. So, for example, I started at 92.8, I think it was, and I got down to 87.2. And I generally hung around the 87 to 89. When I used the plan, I'd bounce up a little bit and bounce down a little bit. And so looking into the research, I decided to do a little bit more digging and look at the other mechanisms that are going on that link with this FGF21. Now, Joe Binley, I'm going to give him a shout out. He has been super helpful here for me and he has been super receptive. I bought his book, read his book and have interacted and messaged, and he has communicated back with me a number of times about all of my thoughts and thinkings and questions. He's been great. But what I wanted to try was the fact that when you look at this diet, it is not the high sugar that is necessarily causing the benefits that we're all seeing. It is really the protein restriction, which, again, if you'd asked me at the start of the year whether that would have been the thing for 2025, I would have laughed because I figured I knew pretty much that high protein diets were the best way to go about things, particularly for people strength training, bodybuilding, all that sort of stuff. And it appears there's nuance here. Now, if you look to build muscle and you want to improve your performance, that's a different scenario. And I do think you need more protein for that. Okay? I do think maybe the protein levels were a little bit high, but depending on who you talk to, that was pretty much understood anyway. You didn't have to go to the extremes to get decent results, but a higher protein was generally going to be recommended. But I think for the last 5 weeks, I've been on much less protein than that during my sugar diet, and then with my recent new transition into my recent experiment, and getting great results. So feeling good, performing well, and well, I haven't had all the scans done, but definitely don't feel like I've lost muscle or size. And most people that have seen me say I look like I'm getting bigger and stronger and leaner all at the same time, which are all the things that everybody's looking for, right? But when I wanted to dig in, I felt, and have spoken about this in the past, that I felt better on a low carb diet. And so I wanted to try out the other side of this equation with the protein restriction and go into a low carb plan. Now, the funny thing is, when you look at the study on this, it wasn't actually done in like ketogenic or low carb states. It was like 50% of the diet from fat, 41% of the diet from carbohydrates, and only 9% of the diet from protein. And so the reality is, if you were eating at maintenance, which is how I'm testing this out, it has me at about 3,200 calories. And so it's still about 85, 90 grams of protein. Now, I know that's not a lot compared to the 200 to 250 I used to eat, but it's enough, I think. We'll see. I am getting body composition tests in a couple of weeks. We'll see how we went. But the magic here doesn't seem to be the fact that it's a high sugar diet. Having Cole comment on one of my comments on his video recently, he seems to think it's superior doing this with the high sugar, but I think that's going to be different for different people. I don't do well with a lot of carbohydrates and sugars, and I was starting to actually not feel much energy benefits from the high sugar. It definitely wasn't motivating, but when I'm on higher fat and keto, I feel very energized and energetic and want to train. Yes, I may be an N equals 1, but I know plenty of people that feel the same way. I've coached lots of people over my 20 years as a coach, and I've seen that. Some people just feel better on a balanced plan. Some people feel better on a low carb plan, and some people feel better on a high carb plan. It is the way it is. Everyone's a little bit different. So you need to find the tool that's going to best suit you, rather than just follow a bunch of instructions that other people are spouting at you. So with this video, what I wanted to present is the nuance behind the low protein plan. And generally, they are recommending this study was done with 9% protein. But I have read in other studies that it's about 8% or less protein to get most of the benefits. So if you wanted to do the low carb option, which I'm practicing, I'm basically leaning into thickened cream, MCT oil, stearic acid from tallow, and cacao butter. Right, because stearic acid, again, looking back at the research, seems to stimulate these things a little bit better and not have a negative response on other things. I'm also going to be using the collagen protein with leucine around training that was suggested by Joe Binley in his book regarding FGF21. So that should not downregulate the FGF21 because it's not got the isoleucine, which seems to be the catalyst for stopping FGF21 production. And I'm going to do the fat fast instead of the sugar fast and see how that goes over. Now, I did fuck up my first day and had a little bit too much protein because I have these lovely brisket burgers in my fridge. And when I did the macronutrients on it, it put me up into like 15% protein for the day. So a little bit high. But I am going to be having sort of a protein meal during the day maybe 2. So I'm thinking, because the brisket burgers are about 25 grams of protein, and I'm allowing myself up to 85 grams of protein a day. Now you got to remember the thickened cream and the other things. I had cauliflower for lunch with tallow, butter, and some cheese. All these other things are going to have some protein in it too. Now, that was the other thing. Because I'm so used to looking for things with higher protein, it's actually really, really hard to find things with no protein in them that are not sugar. Which is interesting, because most of the things that I'm leaning into are animal based, obviously, to get the fats. I'm going to look into getting some avocado. I am using some olive oil and that sort of thing. But yeah, most of the things that I'm finding, apart from like, because even cream has protein and carbs in it. I'm not really stressed about the carb side of things. I'm not necessarily going into under any specific. I'm going with low carb vegetables, so I'm not trying to get up to that 41% that they did in the study. I am doing this sort of ketogenic with the fat fast style protocol that I'm talking about. So it will be about 50 grams of carbs or less, but the goal isn't necessarily the ketosis. It's just to follow the FGF21 principles. Okay, so I'm not really focused on the ketosis side of things. So if I have a few extra carbs, that is what I'm sort of basing this off, because it might be a protocol that other people might be able to use who don't want to go ketogenic. They might want some vegetables, maybe some chickpeas or some other stuff in their plan, without obsessing about being super low carbs and still get the benefits of the fat loss. Now, I started yesterday. Overnight, I lost 1.8 kilos, which is to be expected when you go into a lower carb plan, I'm guessing. So it is, however, the same sort of loss that I had when I initially started the sugar fast. Was a very big drop overnight. And again, so it's not quite as easy to explain as just a water loss, because I'm not particularly overweight. I don't have a lot of inflammation. I have been following other protocols like the sugar diet recently, where I felt like I wasn't very inflamed and I wasn't bloated or anything like that. So I'm not quite sure what the initial loss has been overnight. Okay, the 1.8 kilos. It took me from 89.8 down to literally 87. So I will give you my feedback down the track. But what I'm trying to get across to people is it's okay to experiment a little bit. It's okay to try things out. You've got to try these things out to be able to understand them and see if they're a good fit for you. Now, these things like the fast, like the sugar fast, the sugar diet, these are tools, okay? Even the keto diet, it's a tool. It will work for some people. It won't work for other people. They just won't feel good on it. Okay, so you need to find what is going to work for you sustainably and long term. That is what I think most people need to be focused on. Not necessarily this diet or that diet or this trend or this crash fad. You need to see where it's going to fit for you, what's going to be beneficial right now. Now, I'm in Australia. It's freaking freezing here at the moment where I am. And so that may have been a play into why I didn't find the sugar diet really effective for me at the moment. A lot of the people that I'm following, like Mark Bill and stuff like that, it's summer over there and it's warm and those smoothies feel great right now. Maybe that's something I revisit when it starts to warm up again and I try that. Now, in saying that, I have another plan. If you want to stay tuned to my next video, I will go over my plan that does actually incorporate parts of the sugar diet into my ketogenic fat fasting plan. But I want to do a couple of weeks of the fat fasting first, so I'll give a bit more detail on what I'm doing and how I've been doing it in my next video, and then I'll explain how I'm going to introduce the carb refeeds, very similar to how I used to do cyclic keto. And maybe, I'm not quite sure, this is my experiment. I've had some feedback from Joe Binley to give me some ideas, but I will give you my feedback. If you enjoyed this, let me know in the comments, or if you have any questions about what I'm doing, put them in the comments too.